The Housing Network is an alliance of organizations who share the vision that all Rhode Islanders live in safe, healthy, affordable homes in thriving communities. There are many entrenched systems in place that make achieving that vision feel impossible. And yet, the reason that many of us are here today is because of a deep and shared belief that with collaboration, steadfast commitment, and action, we can shift structural imbalances and make what feels impossible a reality. I'm privileged in my role to work alongside such dedicated leaders and partners, some of whom you'll hear from today, and who day in and day out are fighting for today, for tomorrow, and working to create the future that leaves no one behind or out in the cold. Our state has made meaningful progress in recent years to increase housing production, but Rhode Islanders with the lowest incomes, who have the greatest need for affordability and stability, face the most acute shortage of available homes. The gap between incomes and rents is too wide for households at or below the poverty level, and for many low-income and disabled people experiencing homelessness, even newly built affordable units are out of reach without additional support. And that is why rental subsidy is such an important part of a functioning housing system. Across the country, states are increasingly recognizing that relying on federal resources alone is not enough to meet the scale of this challenge. State-funded rental subsidy programs are one of the most effective tools available to help ensure that deeply affordable housing is actually accessible to the people who need it most. And the state-funded rental subsidy legislation we're announcing today represents an important step toward building that tool here in Rhode Island. We are grateful to the sponsors of this legislation, House Deputy Majority Leader and First Vice Chair of Finance Scott Slater, and Senate Health and Human Services Chairwoman Melissa Murray, for their leadership in advancing this bill. I also want to thank and acknowledge my representative, Speaker Shekarchi, for his steadfast commitment to address Rhode Island's housing challenges, and thank the General Assembly at large for key housing legislation that has passed over the last 5 years. And I just want to thank folks in the audience. I see Chairman Basalian, Senator Quezada, House Policy Director Lynn Urbani, big thank you to Lynn, Representative Speakman, Senator Urso. I am sure I'm missing other folks, but thank you all, those of you from the legislature, for being here today, and our community partners. I am now pleased to introduce our first speaker, Representative Scott Slater. Rep. Slater has long been a supporter of legislation that advances economic opportunity and helps address the needs of low-income Rhode Islanders. Thank you, Rep., for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for those warm remarks and for recognizing many of the other elected officials that are in the room. Take that pressure off of me. Thank you. And also, I'd like to also thank Speaker Shekarchi for the amazing work that he's done on housing and on many issues, and just being such a great leader for us in the House on so many important issues. Him and Majority Leader Blazajewski have just been wonderful to work with on many of these issues. So thank you to him. But good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. I'm proud to stand here today supporting legislation that would create a state-funded rental subsidy program to help Rhode Islanders experience homelessness and find and keep stable housing. In Providence, the housing crisis isn't abstract. It's visible every day. And I say that now. Before I came up here, I bumped into a friend of mine, David, who I bought lunch for downtown. And he was, making sure that he was back at Crossroads by 6 so that he could have a place to stay this evening. And he's a dear friend, and I've tried to help him out over the years. But, in these housing issues, they're multifaceted. Sometimes there's substance issues. And so I appreciate all the folks that are here that work on these issues on a regular basis. It means a lot to so many folks in the state. But families are struggling to keep up with rent. Older adults are worried about losing the homes they've lived in for years, and far too many of our neighbors are being pushed into homelessness. Over the past several years, the General Assembly has taken important steps to increase housing production, zoning reform, a historic housing bond, and new incentives built for more affordable housing. Those efforts matter, and they're beginning to make a difference. But for many Rhode Islanders experiencing homelessness, especially those with disabilities and extremely low incomes, even affordable housing is still out of reach. When someone is living only on SSI, even SSDI, there is simply no way to pay rent without additional support. That's where this bill comes in. H7803 creates a state-funded rental subsidy that can be paired with housing developments so that tenants pay no more than 30% of their income towards rent. That means creating a resource that the housing we are building can serve populations who need it the most, not just in theory, but in reality. And just as importantly, this legislation represents the first step towards building a durable, long-lasting funding stream to supporting deeply affordable housing in Rhode Island for populations most likely to be left out of the housing market. People experience homelessness with disabilities and who are extremely low income. If we are serious about ending homelessness, we need the tools that are built to last, not short-term fixes. Housing is a foundation that allows people to work, stay healthy, and participate meaningfully in their communities. This bill moves us closer to a system where the most vulnerable Rhode Islanders are not left behind. And I'm proud to sponsor it, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to move this forward. And so thank you all for being here. And in particular, I remember one of the first times coming, well, not first time, but early on when my father was a representative and he, before me, and represented the same district. He had became ill with cancer, and in his final days when he was up here, he was recognized. He was recognized for an award that he was going to receive in Washington for one of the early housing bonds. And I remember Sharon Conrad Wells over at West Elmwood Housing, and she had nominated him for an award. He didn't end up being able to receive it, but I went in his honor to Washington with Sharon and to receive that award. And it was one of the greatest privileges of my life to have that recognition given to him. He used to say, housing is a staple. It's something, it's tough to concentrate on many other issues if you don't have a stable place to live, whether it be education, with test results, education, substance abuse. If you don't have a stable house to live in, it's tough to concentrate. So this bill means a lot to me, and on a regular basis, I'm calling for constituents and calling about assistance that they need. So thank you. I look forward to pushing and working hard to get this legislation passed. And Katie, am I turning this over to, are you coming back up, or should I turn it over to Senator Murray, who I'm proud to work on this legislation and work on this with you. So. And thank you for this beautiful gift bag of some nice little goodies.
Thank you so much, Representative. We really appreciate your support for this. I'm pleased to introduce Chairwoman Melissa Murray. As Chair of Health and Human Services, Senator Murray understands the deep connection between housing and health and has sponsored legislation in the past, including the state's rental application fee ban to make housing more accessible for Rhode Islanders who need it most. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank everyone for being here. I'd like to acknowledge Senator Basilian, Senator Quesada, and Senator Urso, and I think I got everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Rep. Slater for your leadership on this issue. I know you're very passionate about it, and for clearly laying out why this legislation is so important to Rhode Islanders. I'm proud to be introducing the Senate companion to this legislation, which is S 2681. It establishes, as we stated, a state-funded rental subsidy program designed to help Rhode Islanders experiencing homelessness or at serious risk of homelessness to access stable, permanent housing. As Representative Slater stated, Rhode Island has made significant progress in recent years when it comes to expanding our housing supply, but for many of our most vulnerable residents, particularly those with low incomes or disabilities, the housing we are building is still financially out of reach for them. That is why rental subsidy programs like this are so critical. I want to emphasize another important point. This is not only the right thing to do, it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. We know that homelessness is extraordinarily expensive for our public systems. When people don't have stable housing, they're far more likely to rely on emergency shelters, hospital rooms, crisis behavioral health services, and other costly interventions. This is especially true when those who are the most vulnerable, in the case of the ones who are the most vulnerable, which are those experiencing homelessness who also have disabilities. So in many cases, the state ends up spending far more money responding to the consequences of homelessness than it would to simply ensure someone has a stable housing in the first place. So providing targeted rental relief subsidies can help break that cycle. Stable housing reduces pressure on emergency rooms, it improves health outcomes, it allows people to focus on work, recovery, and stability in their own lives. It's a proactive investment that helps prevent much higher public costs down the road, public costs that we right now are paying for. This legislation is designed to be strategic. By pairing these rental subsidies with housing developments, we can ensure that deeply affordable units remain available long-term for individuals and families exiting homelessness. And importantly, this program represents the beginning of a durable, long-term tool for housing for Rhode Island, one that future legislatures can continue to strengthen as we build more stable and effective housing system for all. In short, I'm very proud to be the sponsor of the Senate version of this bill, and I look forward to working with my colleagues in both chambers to move this initiative forward. Thank you so much.
I'm going to give another round of applause for our sponsors. Thank you. I'd next like to introduce Michelle Wilcox, President and CEO of Crossroads Rhode Island. Crossroads Rhode Island is a leading housing and service provider to Rhode Islanders experiencing homelessness, and Michelle has been a longstanding advocate for policies that move us closer to ending homelessness. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Katie, and thank you and Melina and the Housing Network for your leadership on this issue. We really value you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Representative Slater and Senator Murray, for your leadership on this important issue. As Katie said, I'm Michelle Wilcox. I'm President and CEO of Crossroads Rhode Island. Every day, our organization works with individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness or who are on the brink of losing their housing. What we know on the ground reinforces something we know across the country. The biggest barrier to ending homelessness is not a lack of effort or partnership. It's the lack of housing that people with the lowest incomes can actually afford. Rhode Island has taken important steps in recent years to increase housing production, from zoning reforms and development streamlining to the historic investment in the housing bond and creation of a state low-income housing tax credit. These are critical investments, and they are helping move our state in the right direction. But they don't solve the entire problem. For households living on extremely low incomes, often 30% of the area median income or less, even housing that is labeled affordable is often still out of reach. The gap between what people can afford and what it costs to operate housing is exactly why these rental subsidies are so essential. For many years, federal housing vouchers and continuum of care programs have helped bridge that gap and move thousands of Rhode Islanders from shelters into stable housing. But those resources have never been enough, and today they are increasingly uncertain. That's why the legislation being discussed here today is so important. A state-funded rental subsidy program would give Rhode Island something we don't currently have: a reliable, locally controlled tool to ensure that people with the greatest barriers to housing stability are not left behind. It would ensure that tenants pay no more than 30% of their income toward rent, and it would help Rhode Island fully utilize the affordable housing we're already investing in. At Crossroads, we see every day that when people have access to stable housing, everything changes. Health improves, employment becomes possible, families are able to begin to rebuild their lives. And the results are clear. When people are connected to stable housing with the right supports, as many as 96% will never return to homelessness. Housing is the only proven solution to homelessness. If we want to meaningfully reduce homelessness in Rhode Island, we have to make sure that the people with the lowest incomes can actually afford the housing we are building. This legislation is an important step towards creating more stable and sustainable housing system for Rhode Islanders. And at its core, it reflects something even more fundamental, a shared belief that in Rhode Island, everyone deserves the stability, dignity, and safety of a place to call home. Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Charlie Thomas Davison, Director of Real Estate Development with the Women's Development Corporation, and perhaps more importantly, Chair of the Rhode Island Continuum of Care Board. Charlie.
Thank you, Michelle. So good afternoon, and thank you, Representative Slater and Senator Murray and Michelle, for your leadership and for highlighting why this legislation is so important. My name is Charlie Thomas Davison. I serve as the chair of the Rhode Island COC, as Michelle mentioned, and Director of Real Estate Development at Women's Development Corporation. We are a nonprofit housing developer and property manager that's been developing and operating affordable housing across Rhode Island for nearly 50 years. So I speak today as a developer, an owner, a manager, and as somebody deeply involved in Rhode Island's homeless response system. And I do this because I care about building a system that actually works for the people who need it the most. I've seen how vulnerable housing development can be when it relies on federal funding. About 6 months ago, the Rhode Island Continuum of Care and Women's Development Corporation were awarded $7 million from HUD to develop 14 units of permanent supportive housing for families experiencing homelessness and fleeing domestic violence. That award was highly competitive. It included capital, multi-year rental subsidy, and services support, a rare opportunity. Take my word for it. That award was rescinded and now faces uncertainty as we're currently challenging it in court. And that highlights the need for stable, state-controlled resources when it comes to the critical task of affordable housing development. Over the past several years, Rhode Island has made significant progress in supporting the development of new affordable housing. Programs like the State Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, coupled with the State Housing Bond, funded at historic levels, have given us powerful tools to finance and build new homes. But those programs primarily support the construction of housing. They do not provide the ongoing rental subsidy necessary to make affordable housing affordable for households with extremely low income, particularly those with disabilities and at risk or experiencing homelessness. Affordable housing, unfortunately, is still not affordable for everyone. These homes simply cannot exist without rental subsidy. Rhode Island has set an ambitious goal through the Housing 2030 plan: create 15,000 new homes, more than 2,200 affordable rental homes, and of that, 375 for permanent supportive housing and 500 additional for extremely low income are to be developed in the next 4 years, by the end of this decade, which, believe it or not, is 4 years. Programs like this one being proposed today are really the missing piece that will allow Rhode Island to deliver on these Housing 2030 commitments that we've made. By providing project-based rental assistance that can be paired with housing developments already in the pipeline, this legislation gives developers and housing providers the financial resources needed to dedicate units to households with extremely low income. It also supports the development of new projects designed to intentionally serve individuals exiting homelessness and those facing the greatest barriers to housing stability. Ultimately, as others have said, the solution to homelessness is housing. But housing development is more than building structures. It's about building a system that works. And a system that works is one that provides safe, stable housing and is accessible to our most vulnerable neighbors. Right now, the system doesn't work. With this legislation, Rhode Island takes a critical step toward a system where the homes we build can actually serve the people who need them the most. And for that, I am grateful also to the sponsors and partners working to make that possible alongside, the rest of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. And lastly, I'm very proud to introduce Don King. Many of you may know Don from his tireless advocacy and his commitment to supporting unhoused Rhode Islanders, as well as his personal story of homelessness. Thank you, Don, for being with us today and elevating the importance of enacting this legislation. And I just want to say thank you, Representative Stewart, for stopping by.
Hi, everybody. My name's Don, and 1 year ago, I was living in a tent and started advocating for people like myself. And since that time, I've moved into first a motel program and then into a co-op living program, where I am extremely grateful to have a roof over my head, which I fight daily for because it's costing over 70% of my income. And this bill is going to help fix situations like this. I didn't aspire while I was growing up to come and share my lowest points with everybody. And I've said that before, but here I am. And sharing what was really one of the lowest points in my life. Health-wise, it beat the crap out of me. I've been HIV positive over 45 years. I was 19 when I tested positive, and that put me on a journey of everything from prejudice, stigma. It made me a fighter, that's for sure. And now I stand before you fighting for housing for all Rhode Islanders, because there's a lot of people out there that are not housed and that are sleeping in tents in 9-degree weather like we had this winter. So I had the good fortune of helping open up a shelter for severe weather. It was an overnight shelter, and that really gave me a lot of joy, just being able to welcome people in on a nightly basis. And I'll get back to spending 70% of my income on rent, and this is in a program designed to bring people back into being housed. I can't say how much this bill is going to mean to a lot of people, because it's a long journey getting housed, and then keeping it is even. I know people that have just in and out, because they just can't afford it. How I'm doing it right now, I have no idea. I work, but then working within the system of the shelter system, I was hospitalized 3 times this year because I just can't be around it. While my health is good, I'm undetectable, non-transmissible, 45 years of living has left my immune system shot, which I don't quite understand, and I belong to some national study groups that were looking at being around for 45 years. My levels went through the floor while I was sleeping in a tent. In 45 years, I've never had as many complications as I have this past year. Not this past year, the year before while I was outside. I guess I'll leave it at that. That's my nutshell of the story. There's a lot of twists and turns in it. But I just can't say enough how much this and rental registries, this bill, to help subsidize people getting back on their feet and then keeping that housing. Because it can be a vicious cycle of getting housed and then not being able to keep it. And I guess I'll leave it at that. I hope I said enough about this critical bill. That's all I got.
Thank you, Don, once again for sharing your story and being willing to share your story to empower other people and uplift our Rhode Island and communities. And thank you to everybody who spoke today, all the advocates, providers, and partners, all of you who are here, because you believe, as we do, that Rhode Island can and must do better when it comes to housing, especially for our neighbors who are living at the margins. What we've heard today reflects something many of us in the housing sector and advocacy community innately know. Homelessness is not inevitable. It is a result of a structural gap between incomes and housing costs. It is the result of a breakdown of other systems of care, of poverty, and it is the result of policy choices. The good news is, we know what the solutions are to addressing those gaps. We can make different policy choices. We have developed the tools. We have only to make the choice to commit to allocating the resources to deploying them, to hold ourselves and those in policy-making roles accountable when we fall short. Our call to action today is simple. We urge members of the General Assembly to support House Bill 7803 and Senate Bill 2681 and to work together to make this program a reality this session. The Rhode Islanders that this legislation will impact do not have time to wait. The political headwinds from Washington that may be blowing in increasingly unfavorable and sometimes cruel directions that hurt our most vulnerable residents. But with this legislation, we can take action now to push back and make an investment that will support safe, healthy, affordable homes and thriving communities in our small but mighty state. Thank you.